There's a common belief that twins are not just brothers or sisters, but eternally bound souls, connected by special ties. Probably, that's often the case. But sometimes it's entirely different. This story is about that. In one family, a miracle happened. Two girls, twins, were born. Everyone was very surprised. No one expected it. Only later, the husband's grandfather remembered that it seems his grandfather was a twin. Everyone rejoiced, and the young parents laughed. It turned out so well. They fulfilled their plan in one fell swoop, having two at once. Everyone tried to help as much as they could. It's not easy with one baby. Try dealing with two at the same time. While you feed one, the other cries. You dress one for a walk, and as you dress the other, both cry. And to put them both to sleep. And this was a time when there were no diapers yet. In general, it was fun. Both grandmothers took turns to help. They made a schedule so that someone would help the young mother every day. The young father, returning from work in the evening, also tried to give his wife a break. It was hard, but okay, they managed. The family was close, there were no fights or arguments. Only everyone around laughed. How will we tell them apart? They were exactly alike. When the girls turned 3, they were taken to kindergarten. And there began a merry confusion. Who's Olga, who's Julia? They looked as alike as two peas in a pod. Even their birthmarks were identical. No one could tell them apart, except for their mother and father. These never made a mistake. In the end, the educators asked for some kind of identification sign for the girls. At least not to dress them exactly the same. But how not to? Well, their mother bought them different shoes. One got red, the other blue. It ended in tears. Each wanted exactly the shoes that her sister had. If you put red on one, the other also wanted red. If you put on blue, they wanted blue. A real torment. Later, a solution was found. The mother started embroidering letters on their clothes. O and J. Until they were about 5, this helped. And it would have continued to help. If not for Olga. Olga was bolder and more cunning. She figured out that they could swap clothes. They would come to the nursery with their letters, then hide and change. And the confusion started again. But they found it fun. The family treated the girls equally. They loved both, without favoring anyone. Until one event happened. Olga suddenly fell ill. Just before turning 6. She became so ill that she had to be hospitalized. After surgery, the issue was resolved. Naturally, the mother stayed in the hospital with her. The father and grandparents visited every day. Julia also worried about her sister. She missed her a lot. Even the girls' appetite disappeared. They were used to doing everything together. Without Olga, she felt lonely. Everything was off, everything was wrong. The girl didn't feel neglected. It was as if she understood that now all the attention needed to go to her sister. The main thing was for Olga to get better. Finally, Olga and her mother were discharged. They returned home. There was no limit to everyone's joy. Julia was the happiest of all. Olga needed to recover after her illness. Julia helped as much as she could. All she wanted was for her closest friend to get back to normal as soon as possible. Everything seemed to go well. Olga fully recovered. She started going back to kindergarten. But something in her had changed. She got used to everyone fussing over her. Everyone was only concerned about her. And she decided, apparently, that this was how it should be. She, Olga, deserved exactly that. She was supposed to receive all the attention. She started to be capricious often, demanding one thing after another. All the best, tastiest, and most beautiful things should be hers. And the adults immediately rushed to fulfill everything. Julia simply receded into the background. The elders told her, "Your sister is sick. She went through so much. She needs to be supported. Julia nodded and agreed. She loved Olga very much. It was time for the girls to go to school. The mother, as usual, wanted to buy them everything the same. But then Olga suddenly rebelled. She chose the most beautiful backpack and demanded that it be bought only for her. The mother was surprised but agreed, as she had agreed to all of Olga's whims. There was a uniform, but Olga also demanded shoes that were different from Julia's. In the end, the mother bought Olga everything she wanted. For Julia, she chose everything herself. No, the mother chose beautiful things too. But she didn't ask Julia about her desires. For the first time, the girls went to the first grade dressed differently. Olga enjoyed being different from her sister, that they were just like reflections of each other in a mirror. Only, as time showed, the mirror turned out to be warped. Julia learned easily. Diligently. She liked everything. Olga could have too, but she was too spoiled by everyone and also lazy. When it turned out that Olga was far behind her sister in studies, the parents told Julia. You have to help your sister. You know how sick she was. That's why she's a bit behind now. In the end, Julia did homework for both of them. Olga just copied. Solved tests for both of them. But when it came to answering at the board, Olga had to do it herself. And it was for this that she received poor grades. That's when the cunning girl realized that she was wrong to want to be different from her sister. Being the same was significantly more advantageous. The sisters had just moved to the 6th grade when Olga suddenly asked to buy them identical clothes again. And she agreed to whatever their mother chose. The parents were delighted. There, the girl had grown up, become wiser. Olga did indeed become wiser, but not in the way her mom and dad thought. The cunning girl now persuaded her sister to answer for her at the board. After all, no one in the world, except for their mom and dad, who were not present during the lessons, could tell them apart. As a result, Olga's academic performance improved dramatically. She began to study almost as well as her sister. The family couldn't be happier with the girls. They were growing up to be harmonious, smart, beautiful, and friendly. They adored each other. After all, they were twins. Julia trusted her sister unconditionally and loved her sincerely. But Olga quickly learned to pretend well. In reality, the only feeling she had towards Julia was burning jealousy. She wanted everything for herself. For Olga, it became a priority to prevent anyone from taking an interest in her sister. If any of the boys showed interest in Julia, Olga would immediately draw all the attention to herself. A couple of times, she even pretended to be her sister to take a boy away, even though she didn't need him. And Julia seemed not to notice anything. She loved her sister and couldn't even imagine that Olga could be mean to her. Julia was quiet, studied hard, and did a lot at home. Olga, on the other hand, loved noisy companies, never missed a party. Went on dates, and at the same time did well academically. No one suspected that Julia was practically studying for both of them. In the end, it seemed to everyone that Olga studied effortlessly, while Julia was labeled a grind. The girls enrolled in the same faculty at the university. More precisely, Julia chose the faculty, and Olga just followed her. She understood that otherwise, she would have to study on her own. And so, everything continued as before. Julia studied for both, while Olga had fun. Olga barely passed some of the session's exams on her own, but for the particularly difficult ones, Julia took her place. They still couldn't be told apart. This continued until one unpleasant incident. Olga had a tumultuous personal life. Despite this, she continued to take boys away from her sister. It was just a form of amusement for her. And then, at the end of their 3rd year, Julia met a boy. They started dating, and Julia realized she was in love. She didn't admit it to anyone for a long time, but then she told her sister. "Wow," exclaimed Olga. "It seems you're really in love. I'm so happy for you. At least introduce him to me." Julia introduced him, and a couple of weeks later, her beloved suggested they break up. Julia couldn't understand why. She cried into her pillow at home. Her sister comforted her as best she could. "Julia, don't be so upset. All men are goats and bastards. You're a beauty. You'll see, you'll find an even better boyfriend." The summer session was approaching. Julia pulled herself together and started preparing. And then one day, Olga, with a mysterious look, asked her sister to take her last 2 exams for her. "You see, I'm dating a young man. He offered to take me to the sea," she explained. "Cover for me, please," she pleaded. "Wow. So, you're really in love now?" Julia smiled. "Will you introduce him?" "Maybe if you behave well," her sister laughed in response. Julia successfully passed the exams for both herself and Olga. The students decided to celebrate the end of the 3rd year and threw a party. Late in the evening, as Julia was returning home, she saw a taxi pull up to their house. Olga got out, returning from her trip. Julia eagerly wanted to run to her sister when she saw her ex-boyfriend step out of the car behind her. He kissed Olga, got into the taxi, and drove off. So, that's who her sister went on vacation with. Julia understood everything. Olga froze in place upon seeing her sister. Something urgent needed to be done, but nothing came to mind. Julia didn't bother to confront her sister, she simply moved into the dormitory the next day. Their parents couldn't understand what was going on. Julia didn't tell them about her sister's treachery, she simply explained that she wanted to start living independently. At first, they tried to dissuade her, but then they stopped. It seemed Olga had presented her version of events to their parents. Julia switched to distance learning and got a job. She regularly called her parents, but only visited if Olga wasn't home. When the time for another session for distance learners came, she occasionally bumped into her sister at the institute. They simply exchanged cold greetings and nothing more. Julia didn't want to communicate. And Olga? Olga finally got what she wanted. Now everything was only for her. But studying became unbearably difficult. In their 5th year at the institute, a new young lecturer appeared. Very interesting, handsome, smart, and unmarried. The female students tried their best to catch his attention, but he either pretended not to notice or, if the flirtations became too persistent, turned everything into a joke. Olga decided to try her luck too. She believed she would definitely win him over. But she didn't succeed at all. She was simply bursting with anger about it. When the time for the distance learner session came, Mr. Andrew, as the lecturer was called, froze in place upon seeing Julia. "Olga, I don't understand," he said. "Have you switched to distance learning?" "When?" "I'm Julia," the girl smiled. "Olga is my sister." After examining the girl, Andrew was amazed. As weak a student as her sister was, Julia turned out to be equally intelligent. They started talking. Andrew asked why Julia was studying remotely. "Just wanted independence," the girl replied. Andrew was impressed by Julia. She was so smart, calm, and dignified. Not at all like her sister. He walked her home. They started a relationship. When asked why she didn't live at home, Julia avoided the question. Eventually, someone among the students told Andrew everything. He was shocked by his own sister's treacherous behavior. But he didn't tell Julia that he now knew. Naturally, after a while, news spread around the institute that the heartthrob of all the female students was dating an attractive distance learner. Olga gnashed her teeth in anger when she found out exactly with whom. "So, he rejected me, and he's dating this mouse," she spitefully thought. Well, wait. She won't calm down until she steals Andrew from her sister. The best should be reserved for her. She kept an eye on the couple. Time passed. Summer was approaching. Along with it, the final session. One day, after classes, Andrew was unexpectedly approached by Julia. "Hi, Andrew," she smiled. Hi, what are you doing here? Andrew asked in surprise. Well, I had a free moment and decided to see you. I missed you terribly. Let's go somewhere. Andrew looked attentively at his beloved and nodded with a smile. They sat down in a cafe. And suddenly Julia put her hand on Andrew's. Andrew, she whispered. Let's go to your place. I missed you so much. Andrew removed her hand and looked mockingly at the girl. Why, Olga? Did you plan to lure me and then confront your sister, claiming I'm now with you? Maybe you even wanted to take a photo for proof? Or did you expect Julia to accidentally walk in on us? What's your scheme? Come clean, he demanded. What are you talking about, Andrew? The girl asked tearfully. Don't play dumb, Olga. I know your story, I know how maliciously you treated your sister. Can't you ever stop? You're truly despicable. Olga remained stunned in silence. And you thought I didn't realize who approached me? Do you think that just because you have the same faces, the same figures, the same voices, you're indistinguishable? Well, you're very wrong. I love Julia, and to me, you are absolutely different. I will never mistake you, no matter how hard you try to pretend to be your sister. Remember that. Stay alone with your petty black soul. You can't deceive someone who loves you. Andrew paid and left. Olga remained at the table. She was in shock. She couldn't understand how he managed to distinguish them. This story actually happened. It was told by Andrew. According to him, he couldn't understand how one could fail to distinguish these two girls. After all, they were completely different, even though they were twins. Twins. Twins.